There comes a point in every believer's journey when the silence of heaven becomes almost unbearable. You've prayed with persistence, believed with strength, and yet the doors remain closed. You look around and wonder if maybe God forgot the sound of your voice. But what if this quiet isn't punishment? What if it's invitation? The Holy Spirit doesn't shout over noise. He moves in stillness, building in secret what your eyes are not yet trained to see. Every unanswered prayer feels like a weight pressing on the chest, but inside that waiting is a shaping. Neuroscience tells us that the brain changes through repetition and focus. Spiritually, the same law applies. What you focus on transforms you. When you pray and feel nothing, the Holy Spirit is rewiring your perception, strengthening the inner muscles of faith that make you ready for what's ahead. Think of this. A seed buried in darkness isn't dead, it's becoming. The soil feels silent, but inside unseen life is unfolding. That's how heaven works. Every unanswered prayer is a root system forming beneath your awareness. You may not see movement on the surface, but below the soil of your soul, the Spirit is constructing the foundation that will sustain your blessing once it blooms. Many stop praying when they no longer feel emotion, but the greatest breakthroughs are not born in passion, they're born in endurance. Faith that feels nothing yet still believes is the most powerful form of trust. The silence is not proof of absence, it's the echo of divine order arranging itself around your destiny. And when your heart begins to understand this rhythm, when you stop fighting the waiting and start breathing within it, you begin to feel something change. A quiet strength settles in. A strange peace begins to whisper. Don't rush the process. You are standing at the quiet door of heaven. The quiet door of heaven. Every answered prayer begins where no one wants to stay, inside silence. The Holy Spirit often invites you into that space where your logic collapses and your heart has no proof left to hold on to. This is the quiet door of heaven, and few recognize it when they're standing before it because it doesn't look sacred. It looks like nothing is happening. Yet, in that nothingness, the architecture of blessing is being built. When you stop hearing God's voice, it's not that He has withdrawn. It's that He's shifting your hearing from the surface to the soul. The human mind is addicted to noise, to confirmation, to feedback, to reassurance. Neuroscience calls this the brain's need for predictive certainty. But faith begins where certainty ends. The Holy Spirit uses stillness as a tool of reformation. It's not punishment, it's recalibration. You are being tuned to the frequency of divine wisdom, which can only be heard in quiet surrender. Most people rush through these seasons, desperate for signs, but heaven's pace is slower because it's eternal. The Spirit speaks through delay, through pauses, through inner restlessness. Every unanswered prayer is an instrument refining the depth of your trust. The Holy Spirit won't always send you an answer. Sometimes He becomes the silence itself, pressing against your impatience until peace replaces panic. Imagine the mind as a lake after a storm. Waves of anxiety, frustration, and control keep the reflection distorted. When the Spirit says, "Be still," He isn't silencing your desire. He's restoring your clarity. Only when the surface becomes calm can the light of heaven reflect without distortion. That's when direction appears, not as noise but as knowing. The quiet door of heaven doesn't open with force, it opens with awareness. It's not a door you push, it's a presence you perceive. Every prayer you thought was ignored was actually being translated into alignment. And when your heart stops striving and starts trusting, you don't have to chase the blessing. The blessing recognizes your stillness and finds you. The unseen work beneath closed doors. When life begins to close its doors, relationships fade, opportunities dissolve, plans collapse, it's easy to assume that heaven has gone silent again. But closed doors are not divine rejections. They are sacred redirections. The Holy Spirit moves in dimensions the mind cannot measure. While you see endings, He sees alignment. While you mourn what slipped away, He is rearranging what remains to create a path only faith can recognize. Think of a closed door as a controlled environment. When God allows one to shut, He's isolating you from noise that would contaminate your purpose. Modern psychology calls this protective interruption, the way the mind unconsciously avoids stimuli that delay growth. Spiritually, It's the same principle. The Holy Spirit interrupts your patterns not to punish you, but to reposition you for what you once prayed for. You might call it loss, but heaven calls it preservation. You wanted progress. The Spirit is building capacity. Every delay is a design. The human brain resists uncertainty, craving immediate reward, yet spiritual maturity demands endurance through ambiguity. The Holy Spirit teaches you to stay still while He works behind what you cannot access. Imagine walking through a hallway with doors that won't open. You knock, pray, cry, and still they remain locked. But behind those doors, the Spirit is rearranging the furniture of your future, removing what could wound you, preparing what could hold you. What feels like denial is divine preparation under construction. When you can't see progress, that's when faith becomes sight's substitute. Trust is not built in open spaces, it's built in confinement. The closed doors of your life are not barriers, they are boundaries of protection where God crafts the unseen architecture of your blessing. And when the timing aligns, those same doors that resisted your strength will open at the touch of your peace. When the Spirit changes your definition of blessing, there comes a moment when the Holy Spirit begins to strip away your old definitions of what blessing means. You once thought blessing was comfort, success, or answered prayers arriving exactly when you wanted. But then life started to teach you that blessing sometimes comes disguised as loss, silence, or redirection. The Spirit's role isn't to give you what you imagine, it's to form you into someone who can carry what you once couldn't handle. In human reasoning, blessing equals addition. More money, more love, more opportunity. Yet in divine reasoning, blessing often begins with subtraction. God removes what no longer aligns, even when it hurts, because unfiltered abundance without internal transformation becomes self-destruction. Psychology calls this adaptation failure, the inability to sustain what you gain. The Holy Spirit prevents that failure by transforming your inner structure before expanding your outer world. Think of it like the pruning of a vine. The gardener cuts not because the branch is bad, but because it's bearing potential that could die without correction. The Spirit cuts to cultivate, disciplines to multiply. And so, when blessings don't appear, when you lose what once defined your security, it's not absence, it's refinement. He's teaching you that blessing isn't the thing you receive, it's the person you become while waiting. True blessing is not a change in circumstance, but a shift in awareness. You start to see differently, think differently, pray differently. Gratitude replaces impatience. Faith replaces calculation. You stop chasing outcomes and begin carrying peace. That's when the Spirit begins to reveal what you could never have seen through your old lens. That sometimes the unanswered prayer was the greatest gift heaven could give. The law of divine timing. Divine timing is not about delay, it's about synchronization. Every prayer you've spoken enters a rhythm that aligns heaven's purpose with your readiness. The Holy Spirit doesn't operate on your calendar, He operates on your capacity. The moment you mature into the mindset that can sustain the blessing, what felt withheld suddenly flows. Timing is not resistance, it's protection from premature release. We live in a world addicted to immediacy. The brain rewards urgency with dopamine, tricking you into believing that speed equals success. Yet the Spirit works in the opposite direction. He slows you down to strengthen you, because spiritual growth is not measured by motion, but by depth. God will never give what you're not emotionally or spiritually structured to keep. The delay isn't heaven being late, it's heaven ensuring longevity. Divine timing often frustrates the mind because it exposes control. You pray for guidance, but secretly want permission to move your own way. The Spirit withholds not to punish, but to protect the promise from your impatience. You are not being ignored, you are being prepared. And while you wait, unseen forces begin to align. The right people, the right moment, the right strength. Everything sacred unfolds in layers. The law of divine timing teaches that blessings arrive not when you ask, but when you've become who they require you to be. The Holy Spirit transforms delay into discipline, silence into strategy. When the right time comes, there's no resistance left, only release. And you'll look back and realize the waiting wasn't wasted at all. It was the exact process that shaped you into the vessel capable of receiving what you prayed for. The anatomy of a hidden breakthrough. Every breakthrough begins unnoticed. The moment of transformation rarely announces itself. It moves quietly beneath the surface, while your heart wrestles with uncertainty. The Holy Spirit doesn't always reveal that a shift has begun. He conceals it to protect its formation. What looks like stillness from the outside is often a sacred recalibration happening within. The brain, wired to seek visible progress, interprets delay as failure. But neuroscience shows that lasting change happens below awareness, through small, consistent signals that eventually reshape entire networks. Spiritually, the same principle applies. God's silence doesn't mean absence, it means incubation. The unseen layers of your spirit are learning new rhythms of trust while the external world remains unchanged. You may not feel movement, but something is being rewritten inside your perception. The spirit begins dismantling old mental frameworks, fear, control, self-doubt, to create room for divine order. This is why the breakthrough feels heavy before it feels holy. Resistance appears, not because you're far from breakthrough, but because you're standing at its threshold. Pressure is the final sign that heaven is near completion. Blessings rarely explode into existence. They unfold through alignment. Just as a sunrise doesn't happen in a single flash, but through gradual illumination, the Holy Spirit allows your understanding to brighten in stages. One day, without warning, what was once confusing suddenly makes sense. What once felt stuck now flows. You realize that the hidden breakthrough was never delayed. It was simply maturing at the speed of wisdom. So if everything seems quiet, don't lose heart. The silence is not stillness, it's gestation. Your faith is in labor, and what you've been praying for is already forming cell by cell within the unseen grace of divine timing. The sacred exchange, surrender for strategy. There's a point in every spiritual journey when the Holy Spirit stops responding to control and starts responding to surrender. We're taught to plan, to calculate, to analyze, but heaven operates through trust, not tactics. The sacred exchange happens when you finally release the illusion of control and trade it for divine strategy. The moment you stop demanding outcomes, you become sensitive enough to perceive direction. The human brain clings to predictability because uncertainty triggers the same circuitry as physical pain. That's why surrender feels like dying. It dismantles your neurological attachment to control. Yet this is exactly where the Holy Spirit begins to move. When you yield, you create cognitive and spiritual space for revelation. It's the paradox of heaven. The less you force, the more you receive. Surrender isn't giving up, it's giving way. It's the act of stepping aside so the Spirit can rearrange what your logic has tangled. When you try to manage every variable, you block divine flow. But when you trust, alignment begins. The peace that follows is not weakness. It's evidence that heaven has taken command. What once felt like chaos starts forming patterns, and what once frightened you now becomes confirmation that the Spirit is leading. True strategy begins when human reasoning ends. The Holy Spirit replaces your anxious planning with divine rhythm, guiding you one step at a time instead of revealing the entire path. That's not secrecy, it's protection. Because if you saw everything at once, you'd run ahead of grace. The sacred exchange transforms impatience into peace, fear into focus, and confusion into clarity. You don't lose control, you gain communion. And when surrender finally settles into your soul, something shifts. Life stops feeling like a struggle to climb and starts flowing like a river guided by unseen hands. That's when you realize the strategy of heaven was never about what you could do for God. It was always about what He could do through you once you stopped resisting. How obedience unlocks acceleration. Obedience is the language the Holy Spirit speaks fluently, and when you begin to walk in it, the atmosphere around your life starts to shift. Not because you've earned favor, but because obedience aligns your actions with divine momentum. Every act of obedience, especially the small, inconvenient ones, creates a spiritual chain reaction that accelerates what's been waiting to unfold. Most people think acceleration happens through effort, but in the kingdom it happens through alignment. Psychology teaches that clarity reduces friction. Spiritually, obedience does the same. It removes the internal resistance caused by indecision, pride, or fear. When you choose to follow even when it costs you comfort, You enter into a rhythm where heaven moves without obstruction. The Holy Spirit doesn't measure obedience by size, but by sincerity. The whisper you follow when no one is watching carries more power than 1,000 public declarations. Because every time you obey, you strengthen the neural and spiritual pathways that connect your will to divine guidance. This is how the Spirit trains your perception. You become more sensitive to direction, more responsive to correction, and more capable of discernment. Obedience unlocks acceleration because it shortens the distance between revelation and action. Many people delay their own breakthroughs, not because God is withholding, but because they're hesitating. The moment you act on what the Spirit already revealed, doors begin to open, not by your strength, but by synchronization. Obedience is not a burden, it's a key. When you step in faith, even with trembling hands, you trigger unseen movements in heaven's architecture. Situations shift, opportunities awaken, and divine timing begins to speed up. You realize that obedience doesn't just change your circumstances, it transforms your internal rhythm to move at the pace of God. And once you learn to walk in that flow, acceleration becomes effortless because your life stops resisting the current of the Spirit and starts riding it. The blessing hidden in emotional resistance. Every blessing must pass through the walls you've built around your own heart. That's why before expansion comes, the Holy Spirit exposes resistance. Those quiet inner reactions of fear, frustration, or disbelief that rise every time God calls you to trust deeper. What you call emotional conflict is often spiritual construction. The Spirit isn't fighting you. He's freeing you from the emotional architecture that keeps blessings from taking root. Emotional resistance is not proof of weakness. It's proof of transformation in progress. Neuroscience explains that when the brain encounters change, it interprets it as threat, not opportunity. So your nervous system resists new levels of faith the same way it resists physical pain. But the Holy Spirit uses that tension as a refining fire. He allows discomfort to surface not to punish you, but to reveal where faith must grow stronger than fear. The very emotions you try to suppress, anger, sadness, disappointment, are invitations to deeper healing. The Spirit speaks through emotional friction, showing you where you've anchored identity in outcomes instead of trust. When you stop running from these feelings and start sitting with them in prayer, you'll realize that resistance is simply revelation in disguise. It's the place where heaven is pressing against the walls of your limitation, asking to come in. So when tears fall and faith trembles, don't assume the blessing has left you. The trembling means the old framework is breaking, making room for something greater. Every emotional battle that feels unbearable is the exact environment where the Spirit matures your capacity to receive. You'll see that the moment you stop fearing your feelings and start letting God translate them, peace returns, and the blessing that once seemed distant begins to unfold naturally, like dawn breaking after a long night. The invisible war between doubt and promise. The greatest battles of faith are not fought in the world around you. They unfold in the silence of your own mind. After prayer, when the echo fades and reality looks unchanged, that's when the invisible war begins. Doubt and promise stand face to face, both whispering to your thoughts. Doubt says, "It's over." Promise says, "It's unfolding." The Holy Spirit moves right between them, training your mind to recognize which voice is truth. Every promise from God carries a season of testing. Not because He needs proof of your faith, but because your mind must be rewired to carry what your heart has believed. Neuroscience confirms that repetition shapes perception. The more you focus on fear, the more your brain reinforces its pathways. The more you meditate on faith, the stronger your trust circuits grow. This is where the Spirit works, at the intersection of thought and belief, helping you reprogram your inner dialogue until faith becomes your default pattern. But the war is subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers in logic. It uses your memory of disappointment as evidence against hope. The Spirit's role is to expose that inner courtroom and overturn the verdicts you've accepted about yourself and God. He reminds you that faith is not denial of reality, it's awareness of a higher one. Doubt argues with what you see. Faith partners with what God said. This war isn't meant to destroy you, it's meant to deepen you. Every round of doubt you endure strengthens discernment. you start to recognize the difference between human reasoning and divine reassurance. You begin to feel the quiet authority of peace overriding anxiety. The promise doesn't change, you do. And once your inner world aligns with what heaven declared, the war ends, not because doubt disappears, but because it no longer has the power to define your truth. The alignment frequency of gratitude. Gratitude is not an emotion. It's a frequency that aligns your heart with heaven. The Holy Spirit moves most freely through a grateful mind because gratitude rewires perception. It turns what you have into enough and transforms your waiting into worship. Modern neuroscience shows that gratitude changes the brain's chemistry, lowering anxiety and increasing clarity. Spiritually, it does the same. It clears the static of complaint so you can hear divine instruction again. When you thank God in the middle of confusion, you interrupt fear's narrative. Gratitude reframes uncertainty as evidence of movement. It says, even if I can't see it, I know it's being worked out. The Spirit uses this mental and emotional shift to align you with blessing, not because gratitude manipulates outcomes, but because it positions your awareness within the flow of divine order. You stop resisting life and start partnering with it. Most people wait to feel grateful after something happens, but the Holy Spirit teaches the opposite. Gratitude is not a reaction, it's a declaration of trust. When you give thanks before the breakthrough, you create an atmosphere of expectancy instead of lack. The energy of your focus shifts from what's missing to what's possible, and in that space, you begin to sense heaven's rhythm again, the quiet assurance that everything is being arranged for good. The alignment frequency of gratitude is powerful because it transforms your entire spiritual ecosystem. The same way a radio must tune to the right signal to receive the broadcast, your spirit must tune to gratitude to perceive God's movement. Once you do, peace replaces striving and joy becomes effortless. The blessings that once felt delayed start unfolding naturally, not because they suddenly arrived, but because you finally aligned your frequency to recognize them. The doorway of divine substitution. Sometimes the Holy Spirit answers your prayers by taking away what you thought you needed. What feels like loss is often the doorway of divine substitution, a sacred exchange where God removes what you wanted to make room for what you truly require. You see absence, but heaven sees space being cleared. You call it loss. The Spirit calls it liberation. Every substitution carries the signature of love disguised as disappointment. The human heart clings to the familiar, even when it limits growth. Psychologically, the brain resists letting go because it equates stability with safety. That's why divine substitutions feel so painful. They dismantle the illusion of control. But what you interpret as an ending is often a divine transaction in progress. The Holy Spirit never subtracts without the intention to multiply. He redirects what your emotions can't yet comprehend, ensuring that what's meant for you will fit your soul's true dimension. Think of Abraham placing Isaac on the altar. It wasn't loss, it was trust under fire. And right when the sacrifice felt irreversible, heaven substituted what was temporal for what was eternal. The same pattern still applies. The Spirit interrupts attachments that cannot sustain your next level. He removes counterfeit opportunities, hollow relationships, fragile plans, because their weight would collapse the structure He's building within you. The doorway of divine substitution teaches you to perceive differently. Instead of asking, "Why did this leave?" you begin to ask, "What is this making room for?" That question transforms grief into gratitude. Over time, you'll look back and realize that everything you thought you lost was actually returned in higher form, more aligned, more mature, more complete. The pain wasn't a curse, it was currency. And through that sacred exchange, you step closer to the kind of blessing that doesn't fade. It fulfills. The moment heaven opens. There is a moment, sudden, sacred, unmistakable, when everything that once felt delayed begins to move. The air shifts, the silence breaks. It's not chaos, it's convergence. What you prayed for, cried over, and nearly gave up on finally aligns with the timing of heaven. This is the moment the unseen becomes visible. The waiting transforms into revelation. The Holy Spirit doesn't open heaven randomly. He opens it precisely when your heart can hold what your hands once begged for. Divine openings never happen through chance. They occur through readiness. Every hidden process, every closed door, every sleepless night has been quietly preparing your spirit for this exact second. The same way clouds form silently before they pour, heaven gathers unseen before it breaks open. You'll notice that when it happens, peace arrives before proof. That's how you know it's God. The Spirit doesn't rush, He releases. From a psychological view, breakthroughs feel sudden because the brain only perceives change once it reaches critical mass. Spiritually, it's identical. Every prayer, every act of faith, every surrender was building momentum in the unseen realm until suddenly the weight of your persistence tipped eternity into motion. The delay collapses, the clarity arrives, and grace begins to flow like a river that had been dammed for years. When heaven opens, it's not only about receiving, it's about recognizing. You begin to see that the blessing was never withheld, only hidden in the rhythm of divine formation. The Spirit didn't make you wait to test your endurance. He made you wait to transform your vision. Because once heaven opens, you don't just receive what you prayed for. You finally understand why it took so long. And that understanding becomes its own kind of miracle, the benediction of awareness. When the storm quiets and the doors finally open, there's a silence that feels different from the one you knew before. It's no longer the silence of waiting, it's the stillness of understanding. This is the benediction of awareness, the sacred moment when you realize that every unanswered prayer, every detour and every delay was never meant to break you, it was meant to awaken you. The Holy Spirit's greatest blessing isn't what He gives, it's what He helps you perceive. Awareness is the true arrival point of faith. You begin to see that blessings are not events scattered through life. They are states of consciousness. You no longer chase them. They flow through your presence, through how you see, how you breathe, how you walk through the world. The same moments that once frustrated you now humble you. You recognize God not only in answered prayers, but in the pauses between them. Neuroscience describes this state as cognitive integration, when fragmented experiences finally form a cohesive understanding. Spiritually, it's revelation made whole. The Holy Spirit aligns thought and emotion, reason and trust, until your awareness becomes a dwelling place of peace. You stop needing signs because you've become one. Your spirit carries a quiet authority that no circumstance can disrupt. This awareness transforms your relationship with life. You stop asking, "When will God bless me?" and start living as if every breath is already proof that He has. You move through challenges with stillness, not striving. You walk with a grace that sees meaning where others see chaos. And in that serenity, you discover the most powerful truth of all. The blessings you were praying for were never far away. They were waiting for your awareness to mature enough to recognize that heaven had been open all along.